I'd like to call this meeting to order of the Oconee County Planning Commission. This is May 15th, Monday at 6 p.m. Our first order of business is invocation. Mr. Rude, if you would, please.
Glad to. Pray with me if you'd like to. Dearest Father, thank you. Well, thank you for so many blessings, for this day, for the air that we breathe, the food and drink that you give us, your faithfulness, providing for us, and giving us opportunities like this to meet and collaborate, communicate, and do business for the county, for its citizens. It's important business, so I pray, Father, that you give the commission guidance, you give staff guidance and enthusiasm, insight, wisdom, so that this would be done in a way that's proper, consistent with your ultimate truth and your will. I pray that this would be your meeting, and in your name I pray. Amen.
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 Mr. Hayden, would you lead us in the pledge, please?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, sir. You have before you the minutes of our May 1st meeting. Do I hear a motion to approve?
Move to accept the minutes.
I'll second.
Is there any corrections or additions to the minutes? If not, all those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Public comment, non-agenda items. We have a Mr. Sanders. The floor is yours, sir. You'll come up and state your name, please.
Name's Donald Wisely Sanders, Mountain West. I had a couple items. One is, I don't know if you're aware of this, the crews are installing these fiber optics, or running fiber optics to dead properties. To me, that's a waste of money. I have 4 properties myself and jointly own another with my sister, and 3 of them are empty. 2 of them have no electrical service. I used to do engineering for cell phone companies. I know a pole crew. We had tower crews, and I know coax is expensive. So I know that there's quite a bit of money involved running for dead services like that. 2 of them are double wide trailers. They're unlivable. They're going to be demolished. The electrical service is going to be pulled out. Whoever did those contracts should have probably reached out to the property owners and find out if it was economically worthwhile even to do that. The other thing is the 2 crews that have been on my properties have been contract crews. They haven't actually been power crews. They haven't been county employees. I don't know what my indemnity is if they get injured on my property. I know that your employee comes on my property, he's covered. I know the power company comes onto my property, he's covered. But if these contractors come on my property and are injured, what are my liabilities? Or who covers their injuries? So again, I would ask the county commission to consider whoever's laying these contracts to look into that, because I asked them specifically, what happens if you get up there and you get hurt? And I got no answer, so I didn't really appreciate that. I'm assuming they have workman's comp, and stuff like that, but that doesn't mean they couldn't sue me if they're on my property. So I would like for y'all to, somebody consider looking into that and checking on that. And the other thing is, I live right off of 28. Several years ago, back there, you got those huge 700,000-pound transformers that came up through there that created some road damage. There's still some deteriorating road damage. Just by happenstance, a friend of mine linked me to a social media post where North Carolina and Texas now, certain communities are replacing roadside green spaces of grass with wildflowers. There's a place up here in North Carolina, a community that did that, and it saves them about $700,000 a year in mowing fees. Something maybe to consider, replacing some of their grass spaces with wildflowers, do a little less mowing, and put some of that into some asphalt and some potholes. That's really all I had to give.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
Commission member comments. Staff?
Sure. I got one thing for you. So the end of our last meeting, we had Mr. Baker talking about subdivisions. This is the subdivision that was in question. I did want to give you guys just some general facts about that, so you just have some information from the other side. The application was received on April 12th, and the reply was sent out on May 5th. This was 17 business days later, 23 calendar days, and happy to entertain and answer any questions I can about what's in front of you.
This is the property the guy was talking about?
Is the backside the creek? It says Nimmons Bridge, and then what's on the,
It's a more adjoining property.
So he's only developing those right in the front there, those
So the
9.
two parcels that this is on encompass 175 acres. There's 138.9 accounted for in front of you.
But you're doing it in small sections.
This is what we have. This is the entirety of the plan.
Just one question. Do you know of any reason why I really don't know this much about it, so I have to ask, okay? And it may be a dumb question. I have to say that. But is there some reason why approval is being sought after track by track instead of all-inclusive? Or,
To me, this looks like it is all inclusive. The request would be for the subdivision itself, which is all those different parcels with the different labeling on them.
okay,
Yeah.
my misunderstanding.
No, I would consider it one request.
I left before the gentleman
Yeah.
spoke, and I did listen to it on video, and I thought I understood that he had gotten approval for other tracks, so that was my
So there
misunderstanding.
have been several that the company has submitted in the past that were approved
Okay,
with no comment.
all right, thank you.
Mr. Chairman? Go ahead, sir.
I would just like to offer you the opportunity to set the record straight about the complaints that were made against you regarding this tract approval and why, I guess why he claimed it took you longer to approve this one than previously were approved.
So this has not been approved. We have requested that they resubmit with a substantial amount of information. To me, this is an incomplete application for a subdivision. But we go through, we look at the entire list, we have a checklist that we go by, and we will identify all the deficiencies in the application, send them a stipulation letter that outlines everything that needs to be addressed to be.
So a follow-up question on that, Mr. Coley. I know the accusation was leveled that a similar submission before, in the previous administration, I guess, would have made it through. Is that because they weren't following the process?
I couldn't tell you what they were or weren't doing. I've looked at that subdivision and I would have had comments on it.
Okay, thank you.
Go ahead, Teresa.
aren't you allowed to, there's a certain period of time that you have to make an approval. Is it 60 days or something like that, statutory? So not everything has to churn and burn in a day. You can, within 60 is still your right or Oconee County's right. Okay.
Anything further? Okay, if that's all, staff, we'll start out with the presentation by Ron. Pronounce your last name again? Waggle. Charles.
Is that my?
Hey, you're cute to come up, sir.
So I am privileged to represent the engineering component of our team, Charles Goodger and Associates. I'm going to introduce Alvar, so this is more planning and the time is more condensed, and let him discuss him, and then I'll come in towards the tail end and discuss the more boring technical end of things. This is Alvar Capdala with Phoebe.
That's okay, thank you, Ron. So, well, Ron and I, we've known each other for 5 years. I'm honored to be here. He invited us to join him on his team to see if we can help you develop zoning for some areas of Coney County. Just wanted to give you a brief description of our firm. Well, it's FIBA. It's basically means Philadelphia, Barcelona. We are international. Have an office in Philadelphia and one in Barcelona and one in Colombia, in Medellin. Our strategic partner in Philadelphia is the AS team. Between both of us, we've been working together for 2 years. Between both of us, we have over 30 years of experience, mostly in large-scale projects. If you scroll down, a lot of our work that we do, it's in the United States, but also international. We have work in Europe, South America, Caribbean, and here too, right? Where our main expertise is hospitality, and a lot of them are resorts. When we go out to different countries, you have to develop these master plans, right? And we have to deal with all the zoning and ordinances, not only in the United States and small scale with townships, but also large scales like you go to islands like Jamaica, Tobago, Cancun, Dominican Republic. But also in Spain, we have some experience. We've worked with a large company there developing zoning for Reus, which is a small town similar to, I would say, Oaxaca. And it's located near Tarragona. But well, that's our experience. If you could scroll down again, this slide is basically showing that our strategic locations from the East Coast, we basically help and work in some projects in the United States, Caribbean and South America. From the office in Spain, we go to North Europe and Africa. We also are developing currently a huge master plan for a small town, Kibeho, in Rwanda. Really interesting. Next slide basically talks about who we are, our core values. We're not a huge company. We're 20 people in the office in Philadelphia, 7 people in Barcelona, and we have 2 people more in Colombia. But we are optimists. I mean, we basically believe that we can change the world. And how we do it by being creative, listeners, really important. We really like to connect with our clients, talk to them, read their needs, what they need, and help them however we can. Collaborators, again, connected to listeners. We collaborate with any team. In this case, Ron is our friend, and we're going to collaborate with them. They are the engineers, we are the architects, and innovators, where we try to bring a little bit of something new in our projects, right? Then, the next slide is Ron, talks a little bit of their firm.
So we are a 50-year-old civil and structural engineering firm based out of Dallas, Texas, and we are effectively opening up an office here in Seneca. That's already began its process off Clemson Boulevard. Our experience, much similar to Olivar, has been international, and why that's an importance to us is an understanding of true problem solving. In other words, like for instance, Halliburton field tests in Reynosa, Mexico. Our water capacity was 3/4 inch, so we had to design effectively a storage tank to be able to adhere to Halliburton's standards for fire suppression for the domestic water. So we had to implement that on a private level in a third world country and be able to communicate with those engineers effectively and truly solve problems. Our project experience ranges from the DOT, TxDOT, Road and Bridge. We've done higher education. We've done K through 12. We've done maximum security prisons. We've done county offices, that being from administrative all the way to county jails and so forth. From a civil standpoint, we do everything from drainage analysis to feasibility studies. What we're looking to implement on phase 1 on this particular, why we're here, in other words, is an understanding of basic development standards. Those would consist of things such as visibility triangles. I think those are of great importance as a safety factor as well. Understanding maximum slopes within those grades. Understanding a further understanding, if you will, of egress and regress. And then from a drainage component, come up with a culvert design within the right-of-way county right-of-way. Bring a typical detail so that future development will adhere to that, and then drainage doesn't become an issue in the long run. That's us. I told you it'd be boring.
Well, the next slide is basically a little bit of showing our experience. I think there are like 24 projects, all master plans, developing some of our work. Some of them are more complex than others. Some are, like for example, the one on top right, Claremont, that's in Cape May, New Jersey. It's a big property. We're developing a hotel with restaurants, and they have bungalows. So it's kind of like a rural hotel. Other, I don't know, I think if you scroll down, you'll see our biggest one probably is the one at the bottom left, Punta Cala. That's in Cancun. It's like around 300 acres. It's really big. It has also 2 lakes in the middle. I mean, when you develop this type of sites, it's interesting because it's not only about the zoning, you also have to think about all the infrastructure. They sometimes don't have anything, and you have to have into account, I don't know, like the power, right? Like how to generate, you need a new plant, a power plant, you're gonna need a water treatment plant, a lot of infrastructure that probably is, oh, sorry. A lot of infrastructure that is needed for big developments like this one, right? And it also has not only a residential component, it also has educational. In this case, we were adding some what we call back of the house, which is more storage and everything that is needed to support the big demand, right? Those are some of the projects are there. We share the file with you, so you can be free to navigate and understand a little bit, see a little bit of our work. But going back to why we're here, if you can scroll down, what is our approach, right? When we got invited by Ron, we started analyzing a little bit. We did some research on the area, and we found out that, well, I think maybe your concern is basically the Oconee is not a small county, right? And I mean, you guys have limited resources and you want to use them wisely, right? So what we think is that, well, if you look at the screen, basically that's showing the population where is more densified in the county. And well, we think that if we focus on a specific area and we can start developing that area, and then so like far on in different phases, we start concentrating different ones, we believe that probably the connection between Seneca and Clemson, right? Clemson, sorry, my apologies, Clemson. Sorry, I'm from Spain, so sometimes I mispronounce some words. I think that connection probably is what it makes more sense to develop currently, right? And after that, maybe we can move towards the west and maybe going north. This map actually comes from a comprehensive plan that Seneca developed in 2022. It's a draft. So if you scroll down, our approach for this is based in 5 tasks. The first one would be research and analysis. And it took me 3 hours basically to find out what South Carolina has a guide to land and planning. Then Oconee zoning, you guys have kind of zoning district and a plan that is digital, is online. And then well, if you go to Seneca, Seneca has a zoning ordinance and a map that is pretty well detailed, right? And not only that, they also have a comprehensive plan, which is this draft that I was talking about. They developed in 2022, they developed these studies. It's basically a study, and they also survey, they ask the community and got some answers, and all of it is there. So our approach is we don't have to start from scratch. We can reuse a lot of the information that is available. It's already there. And in Seneca and also Clemson, basically they do have zoning maps and zoning ordinances. They're pretty well detailed. I think that if we basically look at what you guys have and grow it organically from both sides, right? We can basically fill the gaps, fill the space that we have between Seneca and Clemson. And then in task number 1, also we thought that it would be good to identify what are the different entities or organizations that are gonna have something to say in what we develop, right? In this case, I mean, obviously the county, you guys are who are gonna probably hire us if we get the job, right? But then we should talk to the townships. I think if we're gonna focus on the east corridor between Seneca and Clemson, they should know what we're doing. And same with the university, Clemson University. I heard that they already own properties in the selected area, right? And well, the state obviously will be informed. I don't know if you follow the guides that I mentioned before that we found. I don't think they have much to say. They basically probably will need to see that whatever we're doing falls into those guidelines. And well, we should check FEMA. There are like 2 lakes, right? We should see what's the floating floodplain, and then the FAA, which is there is an airport, so we always have to check that. And well, probably the 2 lakes, if they have any authorities, they should be also get involved. And that's the first step. We want to just know what we have, who we have to talk to, and then also, I would say, maybe sit down with you and get to understand better what is the detail of the final product that you're looking for, right? So zoning can be super complex, super detailed. We know counties, or not really counties, but municipalities, that they tell you even the trees that you can plant in front of your house. I don't think this is the case, and again, resources can be limited, so we should be smart and cost efficient and basically narrow it down what we have to do with you. Then task number 2, it will be creating a preliminary zoning map and parameters. That's basically creating a plan that we can use to sit down and talk to the organizations and entities that I mentioned before. I mean, sometimes we believe that going and talking, it's great, but you need something that you can talk about, right? I mean, the conversation can go over and over. It can last forever. So if we have something that we can sit down and discuss, I think it's going to be more helpful for you to get some answers, right? Once we hear what their comments are, and obviously yours, I mean, we would be developing this plan and ordinances, sit down with you first. You guys give us your comments. Maybe we can sit down with the other entities, receive the comments, and then update the plan, right? And with that updated plan, that's when probably we call it the schematic zoning map and parameters, and then that's the one that you guys probably want to show and present to the community. And why on the 4th step? Because, I mean, zoning is not easy to understand, right? So you want to make sure that you have something solid that is being reviewed by the different entities before you show it to people, and then you can express why and tell them why those decisions were made in order to come with a solution. And then they can comment on it, right? And then the idea would be to finalize a meeting with you and review those comments and decide which comments are really important and really need to address in that preliminary or schematic master plan. And then update the map, and you guys have a tool. I think the whole idea for us is to provide a tool that you can use, right? And sometimes that's why starting with the community, maybe it seems like reasonable, but with time and experience, we realize that community can be hard on understanding what you're trying to achieve, right? And one of the good points of technology nowadays is that you can also prepare presentations that can be done in front of the county, for example, and we can film them, and then we can send them to the townships, the universities, the state, everybody. So we do it once, they review it, and they can send their comments to us. So that we don't have to have 7 different meetings or try to have all of them in one room, because the coordination is difficult, right? And it delays time. It's at the end of the day, it's everything is money, right? So we're basically trying to make this simple, but useful. And the rest of the presentation is basically some images of our work. We have this is a hotel in Philadelphia that was finished last year. We're working on some high-rises hotels in Scranton, Pennsylvania. This is we put it at the end. I mean, we don't want to bore it. This is not a design committee. We're not talking about design. We're talking about zoning. So you can take a look at it, see our experience. But, well, I think I say you all. I don't know if you want to add anything.
Yeah, the other thing is obviously we want to serve as a bridge, right? We know that development has already begun and will enhance along the 123 corridor between Clemson and Seneca. So we feel time is of the essence, right? To get those parameters put in place, get to go through the approval process and have them in sooner rather than later. And then from there, as Mr. Alvar mentioned, we can take that information and figure out how to do it better on the other side of Seneca, right? But time is of the essence, of course, because development is coming. It's here, it's already in place, and again, just want to serve as a bridge, and we're here to serve you. And we thank you for your time, and we appreciate it.
Thank you.
Have any questions?
You have a vast, you have experience internationally. How did you find out about Oconee County?
I'm a resident of South Carolina. Yeah, I
Are
live in
you a
York.
resident of Oconee County?
Maybe, not yet. I'm currently reside in York County, but I will be
In which county, I'm sorry?
York.
York, okay, sorry.
So I may be relocating here depending on business because of the office that we're opening off Clemson Boulevard.
Okay, and your work experience in South Carolina, it seems like you guys have been all over the world. Do you have work experience in our state?
Yeah, absolutely. We were from another engineering firm. We were part of the Adidas distribution contract in Greenville County. Did a design under another company. We're developers, we're engineers, and we're contractors at the end of the day under 3 umbrellas, right? We did a design build for West Fraser, a new office building in North Carolina, in Wilmington, all close to Wilmington. So we have experience in the Carolinas, yes.
So are you more, would you say your experience is more as civil engineers?
Yes,
or as-
absolutely.
So
Mine
not so
is,
much
yes.
as planning and developers then? You're
Yeah, no,
more-
absolutely, but as Alvar can echo, that's an important factor in planning, of course, right? It's civil engineering, yeah. The understanding of drainage and,
Sure,
yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
Well, if I can add one thing, I think that's also interesting because us coming from outside, maybe it's helpful.
Yeah,
I mean, we bring, maybe we can bring fresh
absolutely.
approach, and we are not trying to help anybody.
Yeah, we're here to do a job and do it well, so, me personally, I'm excited about this because this is a challenge and something to do, something exciting, not just something to benefit. Of course, that's an importance in Oconee County, but set a form of a standard. That would be our goal, is to set a standard within South Carolina, is to thoroughly plan this out. And I don't know if you guys are familiar with Frisco, Texas, are you? So this is has been 1, 2, or 3 top places to live in the United States. When I grew up in Dallas, it was farmland. And it literally began in 2002, and now it is, you have the PGA that is there, you have Disney is building a new facility there. It's nowhere near the cattle ranches that what it was when I was a kid. So we were part of that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. All right. Item number 9 is discussion of comprehensive plan goals 2023, Chapter 7, Mr. Scott. So, Teresa?
Yeah, can I introduce Scott? So, one of my goals was station, looking at the fire stations and fire safety in the county, and this led me to meet with Scott. He's in charge of the emergency services teams for the county. The emergency services teams is responsible for fire protection, medical first response, hazardous material mitigation, scuba dive rescue, and public safety education. There's also planning and training committed to support the Duke Nuclear Fire Emergency Response Plan. So I'd like Scott to talk about our fire districts, how we're looking there, and a couple other topics that were covered in the public forum that I attended in March.
Yes, thank you for giving the opportunity to speak. First thing is it is a vast thing emergency services gets into in Oconee County. We have everything from the wilderness area to the urban environment and cities and towns that we find. You know, our system is based on a volunteer system. And as we grow, the taxing on that system is getting more and more taxed. And when I say tax, we are seeing a 15 to 20% growth in call volume as we move forward, which not only reduces our volunteers because they're being used so much that they have to turn the radios off at night, the citizen still needs that support. We still have areas that Bounty Land Station is going to solve one of those that are with it outside of 5 miles, and it gives our homeowners in our areas the insurance issue of not having the insurance that the rest of the community has. So the construction on that is underway, and we thank council for that continued support on that building as we move forward with the plan to make sure that there is a facility to respond to the residents in their time of need. We like to say in emergency services is when someone dials 911, they don't care if it's a hospital ambulance, a red fire truck, or a pickup truck that gets them the person that they needed. They call 911 and they have a need, and we try to solve that need. But as that need grows, emergency services needs to grow, and we need to think about that as we build plans and as we build infrastructure and doing those things, as building that into the plan. Because with growth comes volume. Unfortunately, training, time, we're all in a time constraint when it comes to personnel, our volunteers, the time it takes for them to get trained, and then the time they have. We're fighting a lot of that. To include, we're fighting other counties for the same people. And we're no longer just, people no longer just work in Oconee and volunteer in Oconee. So many of them commute out of the county, so they're not here during the day. And so we find it twofold that we are running into issues with staffing, if it be getting the pay up to making sure that we can support the volunteers with, different types of incentives and those kind of things to keep them. We're competing with soccer and travel ball, which we never used to before. A person would, especially on the volunteer side, a person's family would have soccer in the fall or in the spring, and that's all it would be. And now they're travel ball for that person constantly. So we're finding different problems as we do that. But as we look at the planning perspective, the time and interest in keeping the personnel needs to be focused in building out that. We've just signed a contract with Corn-Shiloh Volunteer Fire Department to put two paid firefighters in their area. Their call volume had gotten so much that it was literally killing their volunteers' response because people had to turn the radio off. People have to be able to sleep to go to job and go to make money for their families. And so they were continuing to have staffing issues. And we signed that contract, and it's been a great partnership and working forward for that. And we're trying to work with both volunteers. It takes both of us. It takes both volunteers and staff to make sure that when someone calls 911, there's going to be someone there to answer their need, no matter what it's going to be. If we look at, we mentioned the diving. Just Saturday night, we had multiple agencies on the river rescuing 6 people, to include Georgia, off of the Chattooga River.
It is a never-ending issue. This county has a huge wilderness area, and our volunteers and staff, we're out all night long getting them to safety. We will be going back at some time to retrieve their kayaks, if they don't, to get them out of the wild and scenic area, so that doesn't stay in there and become trash in the wild and scenic area. Things that people don't see constantly. I know we had a conversation about Fall Creek Landing. There has been 23 deaths since 1997 in that area. Everyone says that's the Rock, but it is that area. It is a very large, probably one of the most popular landing areas on our river. On our lake on Kiwi, and it sees a lot of people. And during the summer, literally by 10 o'clock, there won't be a parking space, and people will be parking out on the road just to walk in. And so we have a lot of those risks, and that takes a lot of people, and those that are not just firemen, they're not just rescuers, they're multi-trained personnel, which takes more training, if it be boat training, medical training, and all that as we go. And as we plan for that, what does that look like? And a boat's not cheap. We know that there's advancements on Jocassee, in the area of Jocassee again. Fisher's Knob has asked for services and different things that we want to make sure we project out and start looking further down, so it's not reactive, that we can plan and try to budget better as the need changes within Oconee County, because we are growing and we're growing fast, and with that growth becomes more and more volumes. People frequently ask me what keeps me up at night, and literally, if someone says that, they're really going, I'll bet you it's the nuclear plant. It's not. I have confidence in the conversations and the requirements that they do everything they possibly can to make sure that things are safe. It is the natural disasters and the unknown. We are a peninsula. You do not leave this county or to another large body of land without going Highway 107 across the culvert to North Carolina. Everywhere else you cross a bridge. In a time of disaster for a large scale earthquake, a lot of our bridges were not built for an earthquake. They're built for, we recognize that time, which means we may or may not be able to travel across those bridges to come in and out of our county when it comes to supplies. Every 30 minutes, a train, possibly carrying hazardous material, comes one way, north or south, through Oconee County. And those trains are big. Just look at them. One of the double transfer places is in Westminster, where they have 2 tracks and they frequently pass. And you'll have 2 trains sitting in Oconee County waiting to pass each other with hazardous chemicals in the studies we've been doing. But all of that takes planning and thought as we bring industry in, as we bring corridors, that whatever that plan may be to build that, to make sure we don't leave out emergency services and the impact of emergency services. It was great. We got all these great signs to the waterfalls of Oconee County, and they made sure people got there, and they no longer get lost getting there. Unfortunately, the trails weren't always marked going from the parking lot to the waterfall, and we had to identify another problem, because we solved one problem, but we created another one. So as we build out and make planning, let's not forget the ramifications of a sign and what it does. It's great that we bring the tourism in, but a lot of those create the people that are in our woods. COVID changed our wilderness area to literally 1 person a week on average we pull out of some type of wilderness area in Oconee County. The Forest Service doesn't do that. That is done by volunteers and staff in Oconee County for that. So many things: Chachuga Wild and Scenic, wildfires, wild incidents. We had a tornado in April, unheard of. We're seeing more and more severe weather as it goes through, and being prepared for all that and having a resilient community. The goal is that tomorrow, that when a disaster happens, people don't lose their jobs, they don't lose their homes, and they can survive. We saw that in Seneca in the rebuilding of so many facilities. But I can go down the road and tell you, this one had a plan, and this one did not. And to this day, you can drive down through that tornado area And the people that didn't have a plan are still struggling to survive. And the companies, Borg Warner, some of those that had a plan were literally the next day starting to rebuild, where other ones were trying to figure out how to rebuild. So building a plan to make sure emergency services, and the impact that our growth has on emergency services is very important as we move forward. Thank you.
Anybody have any questions?
Are you gonna be hosting that, public forum? Is that an annual event for you guys?
So we've done a couple different ones. It has been biannual, and we have not set the next date yet.
Okay, just, I'm looking at some of the checkpoints here and communicate frequently with citizens about emergency plans. That covers that, but I didn't know how frequently.
Yes.
Got that, and you got that. Is there a goal for you to improve is there anything to improve on? You
Well,
guys sound-
as always, we still have areas that people do not live within 5 miles, so that we've identified some of those that we will need fire stations, and our goal is, to support the volunteers, at the same time, make sure that the staffing is continued as what is needed to support them at the same time as support the citizens, because it's about the citizen. And making sure that they get the response that they need with the unfortunate dangers. I mean, we have, not only the police deal with all of the new fentanyl and all that, our responders are running calls time and time again. We've had multiple calls, even into the school district, that we're dealing with some of that, in that if it's accidental or if it's a normal drug that was laced with stuff. And so that is driving the medical response. Unfortunately, America is not getting healthier and our drugs are getting worse. And that is a huge piece of the influx of emergency services call volume that we see.
What is I won't say the worst area, but what is your busiest area right at this time? You're getting the most calls at?
I would have to look exactly because it does fluctuate from month to month. But right now, one of our busiest stations is in the Corn Silo area when we did the agreement to put 2 staff there 24 hours a day to move them instead of a regionalized into that area to try to address that growth and call volume that we've seen.
Is it the student housing that's causing more calls? I'm not
Actually-
specifically, but I'm just saying.
Specifically, it's not the student housing. It is the true growth of that. If you actually look at, we call areas student housing, and you actually go into that areas and because it's generally cheaper, we have full families living in, they're mixing each other up because it's a lower income area in some cases to actually, the houses are cheaper, or the apartments are cheaper. And so it's a family moved in, so it is not just student housing. And unfortunately, a lot of it is truly, some of our roads weren't built for the traffic that we have, so our traffic volume is going up, or the road has deteriorated to where the shoulders are not as good as they used to be. All of that goes into our cars go faster, and people think their car can go faster than the road is really designed for. All that leads into those call volume areas that we see.
I have a question. The Bounty Land Station, is it capable of handling a ladder truck?
Yes, sir. There will be a ladder truck and an engine stationed at Bounty Land. The ladder truck is already in Oconee County, and we are presently going to be swapping a custom cab for a mini pumper with one of the volunteer stations that says they don't utilize it properly, to make sure that it has the ability to run the staff out of it.
Okay.
Will there be sleeping quarters for staff in that one?
Yes. Some of the overruns that we have in that building were to make sure that some of the changes, we had to put a sprinkler in that building, due to requirement of living quarters have to have a sprinkled facility and some of those things, but we are dealing with those as they come through to make sure that there's planned staff. And presently, there is the staff to positions in the budget to make sure that that can be a staff building to support both volunteer going out the Kiwi School Road area, which is a very big growth area also, and the area around Bounty Land that doesn't have a station within 5 miles.
Does the station down Shiloh Road have sleeper quarters too?
So the headquarters station has sleeping quarters, but Station 30, which was a county-owned building that was a substation that we are actually going through the process to put living quarters in so that we would be able to spread the staff out. We've identified that it's not always good to put staff 100% of the time in a volunteer station because it has a tendency to kill the volunteerism. We don't want that. We want the joint apparatus, or activity where they have their own house. We're not taking over, and we can't do it without them. And so we want to make sure that we try to be respectful of Corinth Shiloh, who has asked us to, hey, here's a building that we're working on so that we don't compete with them and their volunteers.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thanks, Scott.
Thank you.
Teresa, is that all you needed on the number 7 comprehensive plan review?
Yeah, we can do it after the next speaker. We don't have to do it right now. But in case they gotta go.
All right.
Is there any public comments for anything?
Probably. I just skipped over all that, didn't I? Mr. Tom?
For the record, I am Tom Markovich. I may have misunderstood slightly your Chapter 7 being on the agenda. Maybe it was specific to emergency, I'm not sure. But anyway, my comments are really more about infrastructure in general, and most especially when it comes down to water systems, sewer systems, that sort of thing. Especially in view of the light of the meeting that you recently had with Council and Sewer Commission. As I look through the agencies that are involved in planning for water, sewer, roads, whatever, none of them include the private sector. And yet, the private sector is responsible for all of this. It doesn't get put in without the private sector. The private sector, with the exception, right now, going down to exit 1 on Highway 11, that is the first instance of the county actually spending government money, which is actually our money, but spending government money to improve that. Everywhere else that the sewer has been expanded in this county has been done by private investment, by, developers going in and building sewer systems and then deeding it to the municipalities, going in and building water systems and then deeding it to the municipalities, building roads and then deeding it to the county. So it's the private sector, and yet, when we have these discussions, the private sector is entirely left out. Quite frankly, I don't understand that, because when you come up with regulations and try to steer growth in certain directions, if you haven't included the private sector, they're just gonna find a way around and go somewhere else. Now, I'm not talking about to another county, I'm saying they're gonna find a way around your rules, and so, anyway, just something to think about. Thank you.
Yeah, there's no one else on that one. We will move into discussion 10, comprehensive plan goals, 2023, chapter 8.
Chapter 8 is the agriculture element.
Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry, Ms. Spicer, excuse me. Are you going to go back to Chapter 7? Did I hear that
I
correctly?
don't know, how do you want to do that? Maybe out of respect for Ms. Alexander in case she had to go somewhere.
Yeah, so if you're going to have Ms. Alexander speak, if you could just amend the agenda, make a motion to amend the agenda to postpone the discussion on Chapter 7, the conclusion of that, until Ms. Alexander speaks.
7 was,
Our emergency services.
7's emergency services, 8 is
Ag.
ag. Do you want to do that discussion tonight, or you want to,
Well, I would like to,
I'm talking about the 7 for emergency.
correct,
You wanna
so
do that one on?
just out of respect for time, you want to do 7 now? Doesn't matter to me.
Let's finish up with 7, and then we'll go
Okay.
to 8.
Okay. So 7. Seven doesn't have that many, but rather than read the ones that are not checked, can we just focus on the ones that are checked? Do that? If I don't read it, it's not checked. Does that sound good? It's like 7111. Work to facilitate the establishment of a partnership with water providers aimed at expanding service into underserved areas and unincorporated areas of the county. Council added $550,000 for a water line extension project to help build a booster pump in the shallow Ford Road area. So that would satisfy that. 7123, skip down to that. Partner with municipalities and the Joint Regional Sewer Authority to coordinate efforts to provide sewer throughout high-growth corridors. Sewer South's doing that. The next one, establish partnerships with regional, state, and federal agencies to seek and secure funding for wastewater treatment facility upgrade. Again, that's Sewer South, right, guys? And it's going down to 7211. Continue to support and enhance advanced job training and work readiness of residents through state-of-the-art training centers. South Carolina Vocational Rehab Center expanded by 8,000 square feet. That's down on Wells Highway. So now it's a total of 18,000 square feet, and it customizes its training to whatever industries need. 7231, review and upgrade existing emergency facilities on a regular basis. Mr. Prime just did that for us. Provide, and 7232, provide local public safety agencies appropriate assistance in obtaining funding to expand and upgrade operations. Westminster Police Department got $19,000 in grants from the South Carolina Department of Safety to buy new in-car computers. 7233, partner with private entities in the development of emergency satellite facilities and specialized response equipment. I'll leave that up to Mr. Crine. Continue to conduct regular updates to the county disaster preparedness plan. That's 7234. Again, that's Mr. Crine. 7235, work closely with local energy and utility providers and emergency management agencies to ensure coordination in the event of major natural or man-made events. Mr. Crine did that. 7236, work with communication providers to ensure optimum communications, access, and speed for emergency services, local governments, businesses, residents, and visitors. Upcountry Fiber got $24 million to increase services to build out its network in Conoroz, Fairplay, Long Creek, Oakway, Mountain Rest. To make it possible for citizens to have better access for healthcare, education, and job opportunities. 7237, communicate frequently with the citizens of the county about emergency plans. That's Mr. Crine, and when they hold those emergency planning forums in March for the public to attend. 7241, review and upgrade county-owned medical and healthcare facilities as needed. That was talked about with the Clemson Health Clinic in Walhalla and the Rosa Clark Clinic. 7242, continue to explore ways to increase the efficiency of emergency medical services throughout the county. Kiwi Fire Department and the installation of a telepad would satisfy that. 7252, continue coordination of the provision of water, sewer, electricity with municipalities and other public and private providers. I don't know, Sewer South, what do you think? I put a question mark for that one. But 7253, continue coordination with public and private organizations for the provision of service programs, facilities such as those for the elderly, for recreation, transportation. We have the Ride to Work Ministry, which offers low-cost rides for the elderly, for anybody who needs one. That's it. So of these, there's 24 checkpoints in 2023, counting the annuals and the ongoing, and so far, this is May, and 12 have been checked off. That's one way to look at it.
All right, I need a motion that we reviewed chapter 7.
So moved.
I'll second.
Any discussion?
Real quick, I didn't hear 7113. That was the 2023 objective. Did I just not write that one down?
I didn't have it, I don't know, I didn't check it off.
Let's see, partner with the treasurer. We've got that for 2023 for some reason. Is there anything that we have accomplished that does that, or is that something that?
You know, that would be a Chris Eleazar question, I think. I could ask him. I could call him. That's probably a good idea.
It's just it is just an objective for this year.
Wouldn't the Fair Play Basin study satisfy that?
Probably so.
Yes, that basin study would pretty much cover that one for the majority of it. That's what I was thinking too, so.
I mean, when it says water studies, I'm assuming it means drainage water studies, not water supply studies.
Right.
Okay.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Okay. So we've covered that. Let's move on to 8, chapter 8. And you want to go through those, or you want Ms. Alexander to speak?
She can come up and talk. I think 8 is our ag element. I think that's pretty self-explanatory. Just a couple little highlights from the comp plan that we have. Oconee County has nearly 900 farms covering 67,000 acres of land. A little over half of our producers are age 55 or older. Future farming depends on the successful transition of farms from one producer to another for young people to see the value in farming. Oconee County is South Carolina's #1 poultry and egg producing county. Urbanization is the #1 threat to prime farmland. Controlling residential density from near farm borders are ways the county could help protect farmers from nuisance complaints. Another way to protect farmers is to provide for residential growth in an agrihood. That's a new trendy subdivision that integrates farmland in the overall design, kind of like a golf course community built around a golf course, built around a farm. Those are some ideas from the comp plan.
And actually, there is one of those type of communities just in the Greenville County
Right.
area that's kind of taking off, kind of the northern Greenville County area. But it seems to be doing well. For you guys that don't know me, I'm Kim Alexander, and I serve on the Ag Advisory Board. I am our chairman this year. We are all volunteers, and so what we do is all in volunteer to try to promote agriculture in Oconee County. But with the comp plan, we do look at that each year, and we do try, as Ms. Spicer says, to complete those. And if we go to 820, and I look back, there have been some things that we have tried to do in conjunction with the Planning Commission on strategy 8.1.1.4, non-agricultural development, productive and prime agricultural areas, densities, development patterns. I think we worked on that for a while, and you guys may have that checked off, but I don't think any of those development standards actually follow through. Am I correct on that?
We don't have that one because it's not due in 2030, right?
That one was actually past due, so I have marked several that were past due.
Oh, very good, okay.
And so that's why I had brought that one up. If we just want to look at 2023, we can do that. My question is, for you guys to tell us, what do you want us as an ag advisory to do with those standards that are still sitting there, that maybe got reviewed but are still there? Do you want us to look at them? Do we just give them back to you, or?
Frankie, can I see? So in 2023, there's 14 checkpoints for ag.
Right,
At this point in time, 2 have been accomplished.
exactly.
It's not like chapters 2 and 3, the population and all those other elements where there's a plethora of, where the county naturally lives, right? It doesn't seem like we're naturally living out ag.
Yeah.
And ag seems to be our biggest cry, how are we going to protect the farmers? But we're not doing it according to the comp plan. So help, I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. I can tell you the 2, just so, 8129, encourage and support programs that educate and engage residents of all ages in the aspects of farming and agriculture. The STEM products, the STEM program at James M. Elementary, and that was in the paper. They did a bee, encouraging kids about bee farming. You probably were aware of that. And there was a teacher, the Oconee County Farm Bureau Women's Chair, Lisa Durham, is an ag teacher at West Oak Middle, and she received a $2,000 grant for a floral cooler to teach floral design and have the kids grow their own flowers. But so that was satisfying that one. In 8315, working with nonprofits to address the needs of a vulnerable population. And we've talked about Safe Harbor with domestic abuse. That's up and running. Our Daily Bread. It's a place where people can go and get help. The Ride to Work Ministry. So those 2 we've checked
And I would say on the education part, there's even more than that going on with the FFA. We just had the Seneca group of FFA come and talk to the Ag Advisory Board at our meeting Monday night a week ago, and they addressed things that they need from the school district, expansion of greenhouses and the ways they can teach, and a mentorship program to where they come out to farms, and there were several farmers there that offered that to them. So that box is getting checked. There are some other needs with that box and with the farm center that need to be addressed, but those will come later in budget items and that type of situation.
Is the farm center going to be on the budget? Have you talked to council? Do you know?
No, but they'll have to work that out. We are just advisory, but that was brought up at our meeting, and how that some partnerships can happen between education and the school district, the farm center, and county council, or really education and the county council, and supporting some things that's needed there. On the 8.1.1.10, create a staff position, we did try that, so I don't know how you want to check that. We tried.
Right, but no.
But I do believe we are no longer, am I correct? Okay. And honestly, that is one of the greatest cries, but in all honesty, if you had someone that could coordinate with the farmers, with the entities, with the farm bureaus, with all of that, then you could see a more positive impact on farming and a more positive growth. And you're right, our farmers are getting older. And I would say that one thing I would caution anybody about is, while the comment has been made about hobby farmers and there's nobody farming full-time and there's this and there's that, there are people farming full-time. We have a lot of commercial farmers, and I think that one of the emails that we all received that was very impactful was from one. We have 3 in Oconee County, and I'm talking about integrators. We have 3 poultry integrators in Oconee County. One integrator states that they have 156 broiler houses totaling 3,421,712 square feet. The investment is $58,169,104. And the average grower, and with which $58 million in the facility, and the payment to our broiler averaged $10,265,136. And you have to multiply that times 3. So farming in Oconee County, agricultural in Oconee County, is an industry. It's an industry. We have a lot of commercial farmers, but then we do have a lot of other farmers that maybe do it. I wouldn't necessarily say they all do it as a hobby, but they have it as their second income, as a supplement income that they invest in their family farm. So I would encourage us to try to hit the comp plan, to look at, there was some other things in there and they're not on that list for 2023. I think one of them was 2021. And that is to try and to bring industry in to support agriculture in Oconee County. And that is one of the things that I think that we do need to look at. The 8.1.18, the Agricultural Disclosure Act, that supposedly, and if with your permission, I'm going to turn to Rex, because he was supposed to hear back from our Farm Bureau representative after last week's meeting. Did they say?
No, ma'am, I have not heard back from him.
Okay. That is one that we've been asking, and it is our understanding that that was a piece of legislation that was brought to the state level, was in committee to be passed, and there was an agreement made between the farm representatives, our lobbyists, the Farm Bureau in Columbia, with the Real Estate Commission lobbyists, that this would be a voluntary letter that would go with every piece of property sold. And I don't think anything that's voluntary is gonna happen unless there's something attached to it. No offense, if there's any real estate guys. If you're not telling me I have to do it, probably not doing it if I'm gonna lose a sale. And I can't blame them. So that one is one that we are trying to address as an Ag Advisory Board. They were supposed to let us know where it's at. If that is not happening, and we do not believe it is, we're going to ask for that piece of legislation to go back to the State House. So that one is one for 2023 as well. The grants program, that is one that I think there are several people looking at that, and there have been the conservation groups. Actually, we lost one of our board members that is going to work for one of the conservation banks. So we have a vacancy on our board, and we're looking to fill that. There has been several interest, and I think there will be some applications forthcoming if they haven't already. Farm Bureau is rolling out a new conservation bank, and that will be introduced to everyone to preserve farmland in Oconee County and throughout our state. We are trying to get that word out about the easements and getting people to sign up, but those are voluntary as well. Just trying to look at the others. The vacant 8.1.19, vacant underutilized owned properties to facilitate programs for entrepreneurs. Again, that's voluntary for the farmers and for the people to go into, but I do know there's been a lot of people talking about trying to connect the dots and put people together. I know that that's, let's see, what else?
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
8124?
I was just looking at that one. I'm not sure, we have looked at that and are not sure really how we are to go about that. We try to promote new farmers. There is a young farmers group in our county, and that was one thing that was talked about with the FFA group, that they have a lot of kids. I want to say that Seneca said they had over 200 kids that are interested in farming, but they have they're exposing them to farming for the first time, so they're being taught. So they don't have any resources there. Yes, sir.
If you were to categorize by percentage, what percentage of types of farming we have here in Oconee County, like poultry, vegetable crops, fruits, whatever, how would you, do you have that set of numbers? I think what this 8124 is talking about is new farming enterprises, so it would be a new category of farming.
And if you were looking for a new category of farming, we have the old numbers, and we know that we have producers, and we can tell you the numbers they're producing. But a new category of farming, I would think, would be like your farm center for agritourism. That is a hot topic. That is one that is really thriving in Anderson County. We have some in Oconee County. If you go down Highway 11, I think that's when we can have a traffic jam during the month of October. I think the Little Cane Creek for agritourism, they do a great job. I was sad to see that we lost their Sunflower Festival to Anderson County. But I think that's part of it, is we don't have a lot of they need the support. Agritourism is part of your tourism industry as well. I know I feel like I'm preaching to the choir. But when they go to get the support to promote those festivals, to promote that type of agritourism, which also comes with other things, the petting zoo and everything else, that type of thing, they don't get the support from our tourism. That is one of the complaints that we have heard. I've heard that one personally. I went and tried to apply and I got denied. And it is a part of tourism. And I know a lot of that ties back to heads and beds. I know with a lot of agritourism, they come for the day, so that it's hard to put numbers on that. But at the same time, they may come for a day and do that, but they may also go, say, to the Oktoberfest, because it's also there, so that's bringing more people in. I think I can get that number for you, though, and I'll be happy
Yeah, so
to
the
provide it.
numbers, as far as agriculture, you don't have the old percentages of what's poultry, what's,
Yes, sir.
kind of interested in that unless, I don't know, Teresa might have it too.
You know, not looking. I have a question though about, so back to 8124, when, to Mr. Nix's point, new farm enterprises, is there an emphasis on hydroponic farming? Could that be considered a new enterprise? I just think that science has to play a part in the future of farming. I think that's pretty hot right now. I mean, I've been to restaurants, not here in Oconee County, but when I've been visiting other places, I'll have it set up in a back room, and they're growing their microgreens and their herbs, and then they advertise farm to table.
Right.
It's kind of cool.
There have been several, so you mentioned one other entity, and I would say the Food Summit that has been taking place for
The
the last.
Food Summit?
The Food Summit, which was part of the Food Council, which was sponsored by the county. And so they have been doing some things. There were several folks there that they have converted, talking about a new industry, an old chicken house. And it has now become either, one guy had, I think he was growing mushrooms, another guy was doing hydroponics. There were several of those industries coming along, but they're smaller. And I don't know that there's been any, like, we have any hard and fast numbers on those yet, because they are newer industries. Another thing is the data runs behind, so we're kind of behind on what we can give you as far as data, but I'll be more than happy to try to get a current data before your next meeting, your next monthly meeting. Okay. Yes, ma'am.
8127, promote farm stands and farmers markets, and that comes with the farm center. I know council is talking about their budget now. Do you think it might be helpful to make sure that there's some funding for the farm center and all of that? Do we have to worry about that? Or?
I personally would like to see the county fully fund the farm center. This was talked about in our meeting with the farmers that were there, and there was some farm center folks there. And if you look outside of Oconee County, and I don't care if you want to look in Raven County, White County, Hall County, if you want to look at Perry, if you want to go to North Carolina and look at their farm centers, you can look at Western North Carolina, it's one of their larger centers. You can look at Lumberton to the south, off of 74 and 95, it's a smaller center. I can see our farm center, Oconee County Heritage Farm Center, being a Lumberton. They have a farmer's market on Saturday morning. They have a facility that they can host whatever they would like, concerts or whatever. It's a closed-in building. And then they have a covered arena that is also closed-in, or it can be opened on either end. And they host simultaneously several events every weekend. That can promote farming, education, clear up a lot of your points here that you're talking about, and also have an economic impact in Oconee County to the positive for our farmers. In our meetings, because for you guys that don't know, the Ag Advisory Board, when it started several years ago, we had a farmer rancher listening session. Those were attended. We had a Save the Farm, come find out how to estate plan to save your farm. That was attended well. Everything else, we're kind of by ourselves with James and Elise. Nobody comes. So we voted to take our meetings to each district. We've met in District 5 and District 3. We're meeting in District 4 in July, District 2 in September, and we'll do District 1 in October. And then we'll be back at the county to finish up for the end of the year. Those meetings have all been well attended, and we have heard from the farmers. One thing that they want in District 5 and District 3 is a business, an industry that supports agriculture. And what we're finding is we don't have that, meaning they need an industry, like they were talking about their combines. When the combine breaks down in the field, we don't have support for their breakdown if they can't get agro, if they can't get somebody. They're talking about industry. Cargill is granary, and something that might be of interest is the soybeans that are processed in Gainesville are taken from Oconee County and sent to Gainesville to be processed. They would like to see a processor for that, maybe at the industry park. The tractors, that was mentioned that maybe there's an industry, a tractor manufacturer, somebody that could be there. They're looking for industry to support agriculture. If you want the temperature in the room to go down for your farmers, to feel safe about farming in Oconee County, bring an industry to support your farmers. Several years ago, the processor that gave us that email with those numbers would have come as an integrator to Oconee County. If you want farmers to feel safe and our industry to still be number one in the state's great, but 77 in the top 100 in the United States, that's how much poultry is produced in this county. I think we need to support that industry. Does that answer?
Cover all the
Yeah, I think I'm good.
And that would take care of 8.3116. New opportunities for distribution locally and regionally produced food. Work collaboratively to ensure emergency preparedness to include food distribution. If we're growing it here and we're processing it here, I think that could
Cover it, right?
cover it. Yes, ma'am.
Have you thought of, or has anybody thought about having some kind of farmer's market type thing at Jazz on the Alley on Thursday nights? Why not? I mean, there's thousands of people there, set up some fruit, you know what I mean? That's great exposure in the community and.
So the municipalities run their own farmers market, but I don't mind mentioning it to them.
Because, I mean, I go to those, I've never seen anything like that
Yes, ma'am.
during Jazz, I mean.
It's a
kind of
great
missed
way to.
opportunity.
May I interject? Mountain Rest Community Center had its own fire.
If you would, you have to come up,
I'm sorry.
backing up. I can't hear you from back there.
Don Sanders again, Mountain Rest. Our community center had a small farmer's market for several years. They had 2 commercial growers come in and basically run all the local off, and then it died. So if you do a local farmer's market, you're gonna have to build a system to protect the local farmer, or else you're gonna get outside influence that's gonna basically kill it. So,
And I will say this, our farmers market does have that. You have to fill out a form to be accepted to sell. You have to be a local Oconee County grower. They have a standard checklist to check off on that. I agree with him. If you have a lot of commercial or truck farmers, or we're so close to North Carolina.
they were coming up from Columbia,
Okay.
truckloads of produce.
And so if you do that, then he is correct on that. But that is one thing that the Farm Center has been very, I say very good about. Some people may disagree, but they have made sure that it's locally grown. So when they advertise locally grown, they can back it up.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else? We've covered 8. Need a motion?
I make a motion that the commission is satisfied looking at chapter 8
Second.
Do we want to add 7 to that?
We
Oh,
already
wait.
did.
Did we make a motion for that, though?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Frankie
Yeah, we
did.
already did 7.
Okay. I must have slept through that one.
You seconded.
Any further discussion?
Yeah, I'm just, back to the point of the goals and objectives that weren't discussed that were considered overdue. Do we want to talk about revisiting those at some point this year? Just asking the question.
We good? The ones from last year?
Oh, you mean from 2022 and 2021?
Yes, ma'am.
Do
Ones that Mrs. Alexander mentioned.
we could go over that we could do that in our next meeting if y'all so choose. And get those caught up to where we're at now.
I'm gonna leave that up to Mrs. Spicer because she's doing a lot of the legwork here.
And I wasn't here in 2021. I have to go to
Probably have to go to Mrs.
James. You probably have
Alexander.
a record of. I could talk to James about that.
Mrs. Alexander
Then you
probably
get
help
with
you
Kim
too.
too.
What?
You could get with Kim, she's probably got,
Okay.
I didn't mean to create more work, but see, if you would just hire that person, then see, we would have all this. That's fine, I'll be happy to make sure on that. I know some of those things were discussed, and I'm not sure where we ended up on them. I just feel like we talk about them and then they sit on the
Okay.
shelf.
Okay.
But I'll be more than happy to.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Sorry.
okay, so the motion we've covered the 2023 reviews that we needed to cover. So, any other discussion? If not, all those in favor? All right.
I applaud the commission for going through that, and thank you so much, Ms. Spicer. I know you put in a lot of hours to make this happen. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Unless we have an objection, I'd like to make a motion, we take a 6-minute recess.
I'll second that.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, gentlemen. We'll be right back.
regional.
That's what it. I mean, thing in those.
No, I tried, we fought it.
I wasn't here to,
I-
y'all were out to get something that. Get it back together.
I need a motion to reconvene the meeting.
So moved. Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Our next item up for discussion is discussion with county attorney regarding development ordinance changes to chapter 33, which would adapt an initial screening criteria of greater than 20 acres in size and greater than 2 houses per 40 per acre, 40 or more houses in 20 acre example. And property within the proposed subdivision is intended for resale. So with that all said, I'll turn it over to Mr. Root, see what his thoughts are first.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The ordinance that I provided and drafted is,
I'll give you. Go ahead, sir.
you good? Is really relatively, I'll just say cursory, succinct. It doesn't carry all the flowers that may be in it if you all decide to go forward, but it has a basic paradigm that you were asking for, which was, I believe as Mr. Nix put it, it was an initial screening process that would trigger certain developments to be zoned for the benefit of the new commission members. Require them to be zoned at the time of or during the process of subdivision plat approval. And this, the genesis of this was the one, I think, to protect ag land. It was at least part of that conversation. And the other was to, as I understand it, to limit some ill effects or perceived ill effects of high-density development. So this is an idea to do that. I think it is a means to do it. I still think that it is doable in this particular framework. Having gone through and put the pen to paper, I think it's a little more difficult, and there are a couple more troubling issues, at least in my mind now, than when we talked about it the first time. The one overall umbrella issue, I couldn't really come up with a means to do this without going through a standard rezoning procedure. Meaning, it goes to the planning commission, ordinance to county council, they approve the rezoning. If they do any change, it has to come back to the planning commission. That's set out, obviously, in the Oconee County Code. It's set out in state law. The Oconee County Code mirrors state law, 95% for rezonings, amendments, and things like this. The only way around it, and I hinted to this, and I was really just kind of shooting off the top of my head, was like redefining, essentially rezoning the entirety of the county. So you'd be redoing the control-free district in large part to whatever density you want to, put on control-free, and then people could, at the time of petition for a triggering subdivision, request a higher density. So this different district would drop down, essentially this floating zoning idea. I don't think that parading, even the idea, even if there's no material difference, the idea that you're going to rezone the whole county is going to do anyone here or with the county any favors or gain any traction. So there was no real means to do it apart from, in my mind at this juncture, the standard, someone comes to Mr. Coley with a subdivision. If this is in place, we're going to say, all right, you have to either go into residential, or I listed a few options. And then at that point, it's going to trigger, and with this application, here's your petition to rezone. It's required, and it's so it's going to be on parallel tracks at the same time. So they're going through the plat approval process, going through the rezoning at the same time. It's not as smooth in my mind. I'm sure it's not going to be as smooth in practice as you would like, but I haven't thought of another means to do it. That is probably the initial troubling aspect, I guess, practically, but I think that can be handled if this is the route you'll want to go. The other issue I pointed to last time, which was the notion that this is going to ameliorate high-density issues. And I thought that in my mind, not as a planner, that could be troubling if you're looking at the same time to protect ag land. Because if you are forcing folks, forcing folks to build less dense, then most likely, most developers are going to use more land to build similar number of structures. So you're spreading out the impact on the land, you're spreading out the impact on infrastructure, you're spreading out public safety responses, all these things that could be considered negative. I know high density doesn't sound good, particularly if it's all around the county, everywhere. I don't think that's the situation you're in. But preventing sprawl, which what I think this ordinance could engender, could make happen, is contrary to the comp plan in several different areas. The comp plan in several areas, and I didn't know this the last time, says, let's avoid sprawl, let's protect ag land and avoid sprawl. So that was my secondary concern, and it kind of crystallized when I did this work from the last time I was here. So keep that in mind. Is it, exactly apples to apples at odds with the comp plan? The comp plan is not as specific as an ordinance or a statute, but it is a guidance document. You have to line up with the comp plan as you're making your land use decisions. So that's an issue to be mindful of. Otherwise, that's the intro, so to speak, and I think I gave what was asked. So I've just opened it up for comments, questions, what have you.
Okay, before we get to the question from Mr. Root, let's let Mr. Markovich.
You're not gonna wear me out and make me come up here sometime. Anyway,
It's voluntary.
again, Brother Markovich. I have a lot of apprehension over this whole thing, much the same as Mr. Root does. There is an awful lot of legal issues that can make this thing really go awry. One, it's unquestionably targeting a specific type of use. And, it's, there can be issues with that because, the zoning allows for different densities and different types of, but you can't just outright exploit a particular type of use and not get into issues of discrimination. There's other issues here, especially considering that it appears from this that you're actually initiating the 60-day clock when you submit that petition. And not just but when you go to the planning department and submit, you're initiating your 60-day clock that the state says. And then there's 60 days within here to approve the zoning. Well, there's any number of things that can go awry in a rezoning. Because regardless of what we call this, and no matter what, going through chapter 32 versus going through 38, it is unquestionably a rezoning. And so I think there's a bunch of inherent problems there. I'm not even going to begin to go down the road of vested rights. That's a whole different issue. Mr. Root and I have never even talked about it, but it is not the first time it has been delved with in Oconee County. Those who may remember the Monte Lago project from way back dealt with vested rights. And for those who didn't know that project was approved because those people had a vested right. Now, they did not build the project because of the economy, but nonetheless, there was a vested right. So, the other thing to keep in mind here is that anytime a specific zoning mechanism like this goes to target a specific thing, there's too many ways to move around it. Example being the road ordinance that we have for county roads. Anytime we subdivide and have more than 10 dwellings on a subdivision that's on a county road, you have to go through the process of getting a road study done, and then if you have to upgrade that road, you're gonna have to upgrade the road and then upgrade the roads that connect to it until you get back to a state road. I can assure you that James has probably had almost zero subdivisions that he's had to approve that have had more than 10 lots on a county road. I may be wrong on that, but I haven't heard of it. And so all it does is shift where the development's going. So now all the development that's over 10 lots goes to a state road. It's just that simple. With an ordinance like this, I'm gonna keep my development down to 19 and a half acres. Then I can put as much density on 19 and a half acres as I want. What's the big deal? Or I could go in a different route and do, I mean, there's just so many, when you begin to target a specific use in this manner, it opens up all kinds of other issues. That's all I got. Thanks.
Okay, I'll open it up for questions, Mr. Root, or any other discussion.
I'll jump in real quick if I could, Mr. Chairman, just to address Mr. Markovich's time. I know we talked about vested rights, unless I had a bad nightmare or something about 7 years ago. For 30 minutes after one of these meetings. But in any event, for the most part, I do agree with what Mr. Markovich is stating, the issues, what he called the discrimination or the equal protection concerns are there. It goes back to the why question. Why do you want to do this? And why is 20 acres and 40 units a triggering point? Is there a data-driven analysis that's going on that says this class of developers, the class that's going to build on 20 acres with 40 units, should be treated, can be treated differently than the class of developers that are going to build on 19 and a half acres? So, for me to defend an equal protection challenge, a discrimination challenge, something of that nature, there should be something to say, yes, this group is different than this group, so we can treat them dissimilarly, and this is why. So, in general terms, yes, as I understood it, it grew out of the notion that we don't want to have, in certain areas or what have you, as dense of development, for whatever reason. But it's going to have to, if you're going to go down the road, it's going to have to get more crystallized, more firm, so they know if someone comes to challenge it, what the legislative intent was coming from the planning commission and these discussions and going through county council, that these large developments, and you do have to mark it off at some point. So, of course, not going to say, well, that this is just an artificial, it's a fiction between 9.5 and 20. I mean, there's going to be some point where you have to change it, but at least in general terms, there's a difference that you can articulate between these two groups of developers. Does that make sense? So that goes back to the why question in two parts. Why classify differently, and why do this from the general? And those are the I would just call them the kind of conditions precedent to going forward. But if you have good answers to them, then it's a means to do it. Or maybe, this is a moot discussion, y'all are going to hire a land use advisor to talk about development standards, and this changes the whole direction. So,
May we interject as engineers? Are we able to do that?
generally, there's no comment or back and forth. I'm sorry, I'm not back and forth, but it is up to the chairman. This is his discretion to allow public comment.
I'd like to continue on our discussion here.
Not at this time, sir.
Yes, sir.
We've got it up here, so let's go ahead. Mike.
One of the concerns I had when we had started this, and I'd asked Mr. Root, was what I wanted to avoid was having to go through a rezoning, whether that be a BZA type approach or whether that be a public hearing, because what that does is you have one owner who wants to develop their property, and you're always going to have more opposition because every neighbor adjacent to that property is obviously more than that one individual saying, please let me do this. And I don't think that we should be in a position of every individual coming hat in hand to county council and saying, may I do this, with all the other opposition in the room, because there will always be opposition in higher number than that one person that wants to do it. And we oftentimes categorize that one person as developer, but understand that that developer doesn't own that property yet. And it's the owner that owns the property, and the developer says, I will close on this property if you can get county council to do something. So you're hurting that one individual, that one property owner, by making all of these things go in front of county council. I think if we're really gonna do this, somebody gotta pony up to the firing squad and say, we want zoning in the county. And I don't know that that's me to do that, but that is ultimately what this is saying, is do we have the stomach to set additional standards in the county? And I think that's the real conversation.
Hey, y'all quiet now. Jeez. Somebody said a bad word. Do y'all want to bring this up at our next meeting? Think what kind of questions you've got between now and our next meeting, and bring this discussion back up?
I'd like to make a motion to table it.
Second.
Okay, a motion, any,
Does tabling mean it comes back up automatically at the next meeting?
Yes.
And if it doesn't, it dies, and this, if I could, Mr. Chairman, it's a little bit different because y'all are not working on the ordinance. Had that same discussion before about reconsideration, you're not taking full action, so if you table something, council tables something, it's an ordinance, they don't bring it back up, it dies. Here, it's not really gonna die, you just put it back on the agendas because you're not taking action on it. But if you're wanting to do it tight, it would be a motion to postpone, and then you don't have to, then it's just postponed. Call it down whenever you're ready.
You want to rephrase your motion?
Motion to postpone.
Second.
any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Let's go to
Thank you, Mr. Root, for all your work.
item 13. Discussion with county attorney regarding the establishment of a agricultural 2 zoning district and other matters related thereto. Mr. Root, you're on the point again.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, this, went out of the last meeting I was here, and the charge that I received was relatively simple, which was to create in draft form a new ag district, additional ag district, that was more consistent with the notion of large lots. And so y'all didn't want to revise the initial ag and create confusion with, subsequent petitioners versus those who are already zoned. So the idea was to make ag 2. And so that this is what that is. This is 5 acres minimum lot size. The setbacks, et cetera, essentially came from, I believe I got it all from rural residential. The matrix that's also accompanied it, you'll see how it mirrors ag. So P being permitted, S by special exemption, et cetera, those are all exactly the same for ag. You can alter those around. You have a reason to do that if you want to change P to an S or just prohibited an X. That can be done if you're going down this road. I guess obviously you want to talk about why.
We need a motion to approve this. Have a motion?
A motion that we add Ag District 2.
Second.
All right, it is open for discussion now, gentlemen.
Mr. Root, could you let us know the process that once we vote on this, if we were to approve, what are the next steps?
I will, if you look back at the last ordinance, the recitals, and I'm not saying these are all boilerplate, but there's a lot of consistent language that I use throughout the land use ordinances that they come up. Language very similar to this will be added to it. It'll speak to the change in chapter 38, and then what is in that box and the matrix will be sent to council by way of an ordinance, and you'll obviously rereadings in a public hearing. If it passes, it'll be codified and added to the code.
Thank you, sir.
Go ahead, Mike.
So we really, which I think this is a wonderful start, we started on this when Pat Williams was here, who was a direct conduit to that ag community. At this point, we're talking about something that the ag community hadn't really given their blessing to necessarily. While I think this is a great start in the right direction, one thing I would like to ask the ag community is, are we talking one dwelling per 5 acres? Or are we talking one dwelling per 5 acres in a net fashion? And what I mean by that is when we say dwelling, you've got the main farmhouse, and now the grandmother's coming back to the area, or the grandmother has moved out of her house, the kids have moved in, and she needs to move to a little home nearby. The way we're looking at this as opposed to a net is that that house is not going to be 5 acres away. And if we now do a barn with a tack room where the horse trainer can live, that dwelling now has to be 5 acres away. And so we're putting homes 5 acres away. Or are we saying, hey, if you've got 20 acres, that gives you the right to have 4 homes. And when you build the second dwelling, you're allocating 5 acres somewhere on that property that can no longer be developed. It's just the question out there, are we going to require people to put a house on a 5 acre plat? Or are we going to say to that farmer, hey, use all of that to farm with. We understand that you're going to use this 3 acres here up front to put the homes that the family are going to live on that are going to farm the back of that property. And that's my only question that this doesn't really, right now it says you have to turn your farmland into a house with 4 acres around it that you can run a plow through. Or am I misreading this, Mr. Root?
No, I think that it's a great question because in my mind, some of the, let's just say it's a great question. I don't want to go into that one on the public record. It is a good question, net density versus real density, I suppose, and obviously we can articulate it one way or the other. Net density often makes more sense, certainly in the example that you illustrated. It can be difficult to track at times as folks increase the size of the lot or parcel, but it's something that Mr. Coley deals with all the time. So that's different, I guess, that issue. If you want it to be a net density in part, where you can have 3 homes on, in that 5 acres and somehow parse it up differently, you can play with that.
Let me ask one more question since he's answering, if I could, if that's okay. So if we did a net density scenario, the part that I said, okay, can you really police that is say I have 20 acres, I build 4 houses right up front, and I allocate 5 acres or the remaining 4 acres or whatever to the back of the property that we're actually running plows through, say, for visualization. At some point in the future, could I section those 4 lots off and go to James and say, I've got 16 acres back here I would like to now develop and do it again? Because I wouldn't want, if we do this in a net fashion, I'd want to lock that land down that plows are going across to where it couldn't be sectioned off and done again, if that makes sense. Because otherwise, we've just gotten around the whole rule, just like Mr. Markovich said, I'm going to build 19 and a half acres, and then I'm going to go build the next 19 and a half acres. So is there a way to lock them down if they did a net density scenario?
Mr. Chairman, if I may, I know from experience there are a couple developments that had density issues. They needed to acquire more land. They weren't going to shift where the units were placed, but they needed to acquire more land to build as many units as they wanted from a net density standpoint, and they ended up getting more land on. But that's what was submitted to planning. This is before James was here. That was what was submitted to planning. So that subdivision plat included all the land that helped them reach the density that they wanted to reach. So that's established as a matter of public records, a matter of the planning department's records. It has worked as far as I know. That was a few years back. How they track it, how you police it, aside from having the actual plats, I don't know. But I know that it.
So you think it is possible, if somebody wanted to do a net density on 20 acres, that we could hold them to that with the remaining acreage, to not let them cut it off and do it, start over.
We do now, and hopefully we're doing it, effectively, I believe we are.
Actually, Dave's.
So, that same question, would it not also apply to rural residential district, conservation district, Ag 1? It's the same question. I mean, how do we apply it now?
I think for all of them, I don't know of one that's not driven in a net way.
So I've got a question. Unfortunately, I'm new and I missed the previous conversation on this. The Ag 1, is it 1 acre is set aside?
Sure.
So here's the problem I see. We're talking about advancing agricultural here in Oconee County, but we're wanting to limit dwelling size. Well, there's one thing that you need in order to create a commercialized agricultural industry, and that is people. How are you going to have the dwellings on your farm for the additional chicken houses, for the people to watch and keep up at night, working double shifts? You're going to need another house. How are you going to take care of your goat farms? Things like that. The apple pickers that used to come around, where are they going to stay? I think we're limiting the agricultural community by trying to say we want the aesthetics to be in line and not thinking how it's going to harm them long term. You know, when my kids got out, I started ground belting. Had nobody load square bales anymore. When my kids got out, I started running hot wire instead of barbed wire and hog wire, because labor's hard to find.
Amen.
You're taking the ability for me to build a place for somebody to stay and comp them, or them comp me in labor, away from me and away from the farmers. So I would like for y'all to reconsider this and table this motion.
It seems to me that maybe we ought to include the farmers in this discussion and find out what their opinion is before you go setting rules on them. I mean, I'm just thinking out loud. You got a family that wants to live on a farm and they're gonna build a few houses. You know, they're gonna say, well, it's my land, I'll do what I want with it. You know, I got the thing for the septic, the perk test work, blah, 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 you know? It's just, you're taking away their freedoms. And I understand you're trying to protect something, but you're taking away, when you can't, you only protect so far.
Mr. Chair, and Mr. Root, you could probably see where this is going and maybe add some information, but what we're trying to provide is additional freedom for someone to decide that that's what they want is Ag 2. Ag 1 provides for some, ability for someone to decide, hey, I want to be Ag 1. We thought, based on some of the other residential requirements and standards, that we would provide additional freedom for someone to go with Ag 2. So since everything's control-free, if somebody wants this, they can get it. If they don't want it, they stay control-free. That's my understanding, Mr. Root. Is that yours?
That's my understanding, and look, nobody's told me, and I haven't heard differently, that Ag 1 is still gonna be there. So what's in place with the 1 unit per acre is still gonna be in place. This is another tool, I guess, for the ag community, but I don't know, that's a great point, if this has been referred to, say, that ag advisory board to get their input.
So to further discuss what you were saying, the genesis of this for the new guys here and for the audience as well was that the ag community was saying a developer is coming into our area and they just bought my neighbor's farm. the quick answer is tell your neighbor not to sell to the developer and you won't have a development next door. But we tried to provide a tool to help the ag community. Several years ago, there was a push to say, if you will lower your density as an area, the developer is not going to be as inclined to come because they will have to go through that Board of Zoning Appeals process to create a higher density. So we were trying to create a tool that if the ag community wanted to self-zone or self-impose that zoning on themselves, to keep that rural feel, and they could convince their neighbors to also take up that tool, that this would be a benefit. Yes, it absolutely, if we go down the road of implying new zoning, we could enforce something like that, and I don't know that that's the right thing to do. But as far as a tool to allow the ag community to do something, I think it could be a good thing. At the same time, I do think that the ag community needs to make sure that they understand what we're about to send up and have a say in that.
Well, I just feel we're giving everyone two different choices. I mean, this is voluntary. This is nothing the county says you have to do this. You ask for it, sort of like buying a Toyota. You ask for it, you got it. So if you ask for Ag 1, you'll get what Ag 1 says. It's one house per acre. You can build all house on every acre, your 100 acres will be nothing but houses. Or you take Ag 2, you can only build a house on every 5 acres. The rest of it has to stay farmland. They get to choose. It's not something the county is saying you have to go into. So, I mean, we're not trying to change and say you're gonna be zoned this. This just gives another option if you choose to be zoned.
So it's my understanding, if they choose Ag 2, they can no longer go back to Ag 1? Is that?
Mr. Nix brought that up, and I didn't look back and pin it down. I'm near certain that you can't go back to control-free.
Okay, so you just can't go back to control-free.
I think you can rezone to another, it's a subsequent zoning. Everything is a subsequent zoning because everything, in theory, was zoned control-free. And I don't say that, but that's what was done when it initially, so they could get it all in place. But control-free is the anti-zone or non-zone zone area. And so you can't go back to that. But I didn't see any provision. I didn't see that again, but I didn't see any provision that restricted, migrating from one district to another, apart from the whole notion that you gotta be compliant with the comp plan, have to have if you're going small zoning, rezoning method, you have to have the 50 acres and, your neighbors involved with it, and get council approval and jump through all those hoops.
So the potential problem I see is, it benefits me, this generation. But how does it affect the next generation? Because you limit them on what they can do with the agricultural land.
And it's a great point. We were just trying to come up with something because the alternative is a conservancy for the ag community.
Exactly.
The ag community who's trying to protect their group, their land, they're limited in their tools. And you're absolutely right. If I sit there and impose something like this, I have imposed it on my children. But the alternative for me to say, if I really want this generation and the next generation to keep this land like it looks, their only other tools were conservancies and things like that, which there's no way out of.
What about a trust?
A trust, if it depends on the type of trust, whether it's revocable or irrevocable, as to how that land can ever change.
I'm just saying I don't think that the government always has to be the fix. There are other things that.
So, Mr. Chair, we do have two members of the Ag Advisory Board in the audience.
Yeah.
I move that we allow them to speak to this issue if they so desire.
Second.
All right, we got a motion and a second. Any discussion?
So you have a motion on the floor that you're discussing currently.
I know.
Yeah, this would just be an incidental motion. You can take it outside of it. It's fine. It's really what the reality of it is. You make the decision on your own in these kind of issues. And if they don't like what you said, then they appeal it. So it's a separate track motion. So make a decision, and if they don't like it, then they can appeal it by a separate
Ms.
motion.
Kim, would you please come forward?
We need to vote on that motion.
We
No,
don't,
you do, you need, if you don't like it, then you can make a motion to
Tell me
appeal
you
the
don't like it.
decision and.
Never mind.
I got the power.
Chairman.
Chairman, have y'all looked at this?
We take our direction from what you guys send us, and we've not been sent anything in any changes to. I'm assuming that we would receive it after you guys make a decision on it. Before it goes to council, but it basically is what the planning commission decides, and then it goes to council. And we're only there for review.
Okay, can I make a motion to ask the Ag Advisory Board to look over this ordinance, or look over these changes we're wanting to look at? Come back with a report to us after you look at it, and maybe get some comments from farmers, because y'all have a little bit better access to the farmers than we do, and come back with a opinion, should we do this or should we not do this? That's my
So
motion.
we've got a current motion on the table to approve this ordinance as it stands. Do we want to repeal that motion, or are we doing this right?
No, I think, based on what Ms. Alexander said, and what her expectation is, if we were to vote yes on this, then it's gonna go to her.
Go to
Especially since she
council.
just
Not
requested.
necessarily. It would.
Well, it could, because we would have then agreed that this is what we want to do, and then she would be notified that this is what we want to send to the council, and then she would review it and tell us.
And that's what Ms. Alexander was just saying, they would like to know that they're deliberating on something that essentially is the final product from the planning commission, that you've been approved. Now, as far as parliamentary wise, the motion to refer could come in now as essentially a motion to amend that motion to discuss on this and refer it to, the Agricultural Advisory Board. With this one, Ms. Alexander, I don't think this one is so, direct. It's really, the changes are nominal. I think that there's not much that the planning commission would do on this in addition, aside from a thumbs up, thumbs down. So if you want to make that motion and get their input and then bring it back, then that certainly makes some sense.
I'll make a motion to defer.
I didn't hear it, what?
It's a motion to refer to the Agriculture Advisory Board.
I second that.
And this will stop our original motion,
Correct. It'll just be pending until it comes back.
depending on when they come back, then we can take the vote at that time. Discuss more and take the vote. All right.
Well, as far as discussion is concerned, I understand that Ms. Alexander said that she'd like the final. Is it in final stage as far as you're concerned, Mr. Rude?
Yeah, in my mind, this one is really just such a, kind of rudimentary, elementary thing. It's
Okay.
5 acres or 1 acre. The matrix is the same as the regular ags, so there's not a whole lot of pieces to it.
So then it would come back to the commission after the review?
After review from the advisory board, yeah.
Anything?
I was just going to say, and this is just my personal opinion, they both made valid rules, and what Mr. Haney said is true. My daddy never bailed a square bale till I went to college, a round bale till I went to college, and that's just a fact when you don't have hands in the field. When you're looking where you place the house, if you look at where farmers placed their houses 100 years ago, they're all sitting on the road, because they gotta farm every inch of property there is. There's no nice, fancy, long driveways. We're farming every ounce of land. So I understand where they're coming from, and I understand what they're saying, because when you're farming, you've got to be in the field.
So you have a motion and a second, is that right?
Correct.
And so, quick discussion, I would ask that when you're reviewing this, that you would come back to us with any inputs like that says it needs to be a certain number or something of that nature. If that's the intent that you're talking
Right.
about.
The other thing is, you've got to look at it in relation to the other zoning that's available for people to choose. If you don't do that, then you're gonna miss the point of it.
That's why you're making the change. I understand.
Any other discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Perfect timing, though.
Sorry about that. That's telling me I gotta go take medicine.
Well, our last item on the agenda is one about everybody's favorite. Your motion to adjourn?
So moved.
All those in favor?
Aye.